Hello and welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. Global power is shifting beyond one or two states, raising doubts over the UN's role. India and Brazil want Security Council seats, while sanctions strain the economy. With US-Russia arms deals collapsing and Washington focused on China, rivalries deepen. Ukraine, Taiwan, the Middle East and cyber warfare top global security threats. We are living in a world in 2025 where joining us is now Dr. Feodor Voitolivsky, and he is an expert on US foreign policy, security, strategy and international relations. His expertise spans NATO, arms control, global governance and forecasting world politics. Today he discusses the shifting balance of power, UN reform, America's evolving role, the collapse of arms treaties and rising threats from Ukraine, Taiwan, the Middle East and cyber warfare. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Feodor Voitolivsky. Let's get straight into this. My first question to you is, we no longer live in the year of 1945. The world isn't led by one or two powers anymore. Do you think institutions like the United Nations still work, or is it time for new ones?
First of all, I'm very glad to be here on air, and I'm very glad to talk to Indian audience. At the Institute of World Economy and International Relations of Russian Academy of Sciences, where I'm working, we pay a lot of attention to cooperation with India, and we have Center for Indo-Pacific Studies focused on the region. Concerning your question and concerning the United Nations as the system of global governance, of course, in the 21st century, it's not the best, but it's the only we have. And usually institutions are living much longer than people who are creating them are thinking. And the United Nations as an institutional background for dialogue among states, among different groups of states, and also for regulation of some spheres of activity, of economic, political, security activities, including law of the sea, including environmental issues, air pollution, social, labor issues, and many others. Here, UN has a privilege and a status for such regulation. And the UN Security Council, of course, is a rather rigid and rather old-fashioned system, but it's the only source of legitimate decisions on issues of war and peace and on issues of international security. What is Russia, by wording of President Vladimir Putin, Minister Sergei Lavrov, is supporting for a long period of time is a full membership of India and Brazil in the UN Security Council. And I think that such membership could enrich the UN Security Council with absolutely different voice of Global South and leaders of Global South, and also will make decision-making process more balanced and more inclusive and multilateral.
Yes, and let's move on to our next topic. Politics may divide nations, however, trade still connects them. And with sanctions now a common weapon and a common peacemaking tool, if you're talking about Donald Trump, can the global economy hold together in these tumultuous times?
Look, sanctions, as they are understood in the United States and European Union, are perceived by American and European leadership as their own instrument of global influence and global governance. It's just political instrument to be used against economic competitors. Another thing is sanctions applied by the UN Security Council, which have legitimacy in terms of international law. Concerning sanctions, I think that the world has entered into the new phase of interstate and also transnational economic competition, economic and political. And in this sense, so-called sanctions are the methods of political influence on economic ties and economic interaction, including tariffs, including monopoly of usage of some financial instruments, the access to the stock exchange markets, which are widely used by the United States and European Union, are becoming their so-called unconventional weapon in economic war. I think that the reciprocity will develop if such practices will be continued. Russia has applied its own economic regulations and limitations on cooperation with the EU as a reciprocal decision on and a reciprocal measure on measures used by the United States after 2014 and by European Union after 2014. I think that China could follow the same example if China will be pressed by the United States and their allies. Even India, if India will face growing tariff pressure and growing sanction pressure, I mean secondary sanctions for trade with Russia, with Iran and other countries, it can also use reciprocal and asymmetrical measures in the economic sphere.
Yes, and with many US-Russia arms treaties having collapsed since 2022. However, looking at, of course, that meeting between Donald Trump and their rapport since he's become president, is there still room for new deals, or is that chapter completely closed between Washington and Moscow? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very good question, because during decades, relations between Soviet Union and the United States and between Russian Federation and the United States have been based on so-called strategic stability, the system of guarantees which prevented both sides from a first nuclear strike in case of decision to get into direct military conflict, because the reciprocal nuclear strike can be as fatal as the first one. And it has been background for dialogue in terms of arms control and in terms of reduction and regulation of development of strategic nuclear forces and other types of offensive and defensive strategic and non-strategic nuclear systems. What we have seen during the last decade is a slow process of eclipse of this system of arms control. The strategic stability is still here, it's still with us, and the United States and Russia are still having the biggest strategic nuclear potentials, which are giving them opportunity not only to destroy each other, but also to destroy the whole human civilization. But what is eclipsing is the system of dialogue, of guarantees, of measures of confidence and trust, which has been created during previous years. We have seen collapse of INF Treaty, Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, so-called. And it was President Trump who decided to leave this treaty. We have seen the disappearance of another treaty which was more connected with confidence building measures than with arms control. I mean, Open Skies Treaty. it has been also left by the United States and then by Russia. We have a risk that the last standing and the most significant arms control regulation treaty, which is existing, I mean the New START treaty, the treaty between Russia and the United States on strategic offensive forces, which is expiring in February 2026, will not be placed by any new treaty focused on these issues and regulating numbers of nuclear warheads and strategic nuclear warheads and delivery devices, which the United States and Russia are having. It causing a very, very complicated system of further events because between China, which is having growing nuclear potential, and the United States, there is no such arms control mechanisms and no tradition of dialogue on arms control issues. Between China and India, there is also no such tradition of dialogue on arms control issues and nuclear security, stabilizing the system of mutual deterrence. The same between India and Pakistan. And we have a risk that without dialogue between Moscow and without progress in this dialogue between Moscow and the United States, not only the strategic stability can be challenged, and not only the arms control mechanism will disappear, but also the non-proliferation regime, which is one of the cornerstones of international security, may disappear in the midterm future. And it's a threat and challenge for all of us. We have seen recently the conflict between Iran and Israel. Israel is having nuclear weapons, but it is not a member of the non-proliferation treaty. Iran is getting closer to have nuclear weapons, and it is also not a member of non-proliferation treaty and not following it. So we have a risk of proliferation of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, which can significantly shift the international security situation in general.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Feodor Voitolivsky, for joining us here on the program. It has been a pleasure speaking to you. Well, that is all that we have had time for, and that's a wrap on this episode of Focal Length. For more international news and updates, do stay tuned on NewsX World.